I know I have not said much words since we first met, but listen now and listen good. Do not touch anything. Do not look at anything. Don't even breathe the same air as anything. Do I make myself clear? Hey guys, check out this cool knife I just found. Hey everyone, and welcome to the Sandbox. Another year has come and gone, and a new turning of the wheel has begun with the first season of Amazon's The Wheel of Time adaptation officially released. I quite enjoyed this season as a newbie to the series, having only read the first 2 books, but I do think that there were some flaws and a handful of unnecessary changes. So with that said, let's dive on into my ranking for all 8 episodes of season 1 and see which episodes worked and which ones flopped. Starting at the bottom at number 8 is, unfortunately, the season finale, The Eye of the World. While this first season pulled things from the first few books, it was largely based off of the first book, which the finale is named after, and the ending of that first book is largely considered to be one of the worst of the series, and definitely the weakest of the first handful of books which kicked off this series. It isn't that it's bad in terms of plot or quality, it's just kind of there. It's a thing, it happens. Robert Jordan hadn't fully fleshed out his idea for the story and the world, so it just feels in many ways like this finale kind of comes out of nowhere. It just doesn't really mesh all that well with the rest of the book before it. So all this to say, of all the things for the show to change, this is one of the few things that every fan could get on board with the writers taking creative liberty with. But unfortunately, due to many issues with the season's episodes before it, as well as the abrupt leaving of Barney Harris, the ending was not properly set up, and some of the changes, not all but some, just completely flopped. I think Daniel Green's deep dive into this episode perfectly explains all the things wrong with it, and he is the main voice for the Wheel of Time booktube, so I would definitely suggest checking out that video. But in short, I felt like Amazon as a studios kind of crippled the show with a rushed schedule in post, and with COVID and Barney Harris's departure as well, the show's finale was just kind of doomed from the start. There is a real lack of communication within this episode, especially in terms of the passage of time. Rand and Moiraine leave in the middle of night, and then the battle happens the next day, and the woman who can channel just kind of wait outside for the entire day until they inevitably hold off the Dark One's army at night, and then Nynaeve maybe dies and is reborn with the rising sun of the next day behind her as Egwene channels. It's just not clear at all what's going on time-wise and with certain channeling elements. They also decide to have Perrin go face-to-face with Padan Fain, and those characters were not set up for a final confrontation whatsoever. It was very obviously supposed to be Barney Harris's Mat versus Padan Fain, and I wish we could have seen that version of this episode because I assume at least that part would have really landed. So hopefully no more actors for the major characters especially leave for the rest of the series, but I do hope Barney Harris is okay, and I hope he's able to reach out to us in the near future and let us know what is going on. Lastly, the visual effects for this episode were kind of all over the place, and most certainly the worst of the series for me. At times, the Trollocs looked like video game cutscene renders, and not the good kind, and it just wasn't acceptable. Like, Amazon, if you're gonna invest in a high epic fantasy TV show, then do that. You cannot half-ass it with the budget or rushing things in post or even during production. At least not if you expect to have Game of Thrones level quality. The care and the passion has to be there just as much as your wallet. Given all the setbacks for this season and its finale, it's definitely not the worst finale that we could have gotten, but that's also not a sentence that any fan should ever have to say about a Wheel of Time adaptation. Moving on to number 7, I have episode 3, A Place of Safety. Now, this is a big step up from my bottom. I would probably give the finale like a D plus to a C minus, but my numbers 7 through 4 would all probably land somewhere within a B to a B plus, which is exactly what I would give the season as a whole. Episode 3 does a lot of great things, such as exploring our characters a bit more personally after they've been set up and split up, making their own ways towards Tar Valon from the cursed Shadar Logoth. This is the episode that comes to mind when I think about how underrated Perrin's character is and how little this season gave Marcus Rutherford to work with. He does an extraordinary job as Perrin, and while I see why he is so stoic this season, seeing as he accidentally killed his wife, that's a change from the books that the writers decided to make, and they still just never circled back to it in later episodes. It just didn't feel like they utilized that character element to elevate him and push him to be someone better. Maybe that was supposed to be his big moment on the front lines of the battle at Tarwin's Gap in the finale, but they had to move him to face Padon Fane instead now that they had lost Mat. But even then, it is a bit too late, and we see little to no change in his character along the way up to that point in the season. So while I liked the change for Perrin's character in the beginning, it feels like that change crippled his character for the rest of the season in more ways than not. As for the rest of this episode, I really enjoyed it. Seeing Rand and Mat alone in the world and going up against their first Dark Friend, as well as meeting Thom Merrilin, was very enjoyable and highly rewatchable. This episode also has one of my favorite cold openings, showing us the badassery of Nynaeve and sets up her relationship with Lan going forward. But coming in ahead of it at number 6 is Episode 1, Leave Taking. The episode that kicked off the series and the first live-action adaptation of The Wheel of Time was a thrilling experience that, while oftentimes slow and clunky, was always intriguing as it built up the town of Emond's Field and its citizens, as well as Moraine Sedai, her warder Lan, and the mysterious legend of the Dragon Reborn. It was surreal to see these characters come to life on the screen, as well as seeing the events that took place on Winternight, which we actually don't get to see in the book itself. I do think this episode suffered from a very questionable cold open, and it certainly could have used an extra half hour, as the pacing felt very rushed towards the end, but all in all, I enjoyed this episode and found it very rewatchable. Next up at number 5 is Episode 2, Shadows Waiting. A slight step up from the first episode, this one spends more intimate time with our characters as we get to see what makes them all tick, especially that infamous stubbornness of Two Rivers folk. It dives deeper into the philosophy of Aes Sedai, especially the Blue Ajah, sets up Perrin's relationship with the wolves, and gives us our first glimpse into the dream world. We are also introduced to the White Cloaks this episode, as well as their questioner, with 2 stress-inducing, nerve-wracking scenes, including one of the best cold opens that the show has to offer. The episode then ends with Mat picking up an evil and cursed dagger, which then causes them to be split up and puts them on separate paths towards Tar Valon. A great episode all around. I find this one to be better and better upon rewatches, as it really plunges you into this world and shows the very real consequences of it. But taking the number 4 spot is Episode 5, Blood Calls Blood. After the events of Episode 4, Perrin and Egwene meet with the White Cloaks again, who then capture them and take them in for questioning. The performances all around in this episode are amazing, from Abdul Salis as the questioner to Hamad's Loyal the Ogier. This episode is filled with emotion, particularly from the usually stoic Lan Mandragoran, and it sets up the back half of the season as most of our company arrives in Tar Valon. We see Mat become worse and worse from a building curse, and we start to learn of the different Ajahs and their politicking within the White Tower. This episode also puts a heavy focus on the bond between a warder and his Aes Sedai, especially what happens to a warder when his Aes Sedai perishes in battle. It's got great performances, fantastic world building, and some of the best sets of the entire season, and it also sets up the pieces at play for our final few episodes. However, what puts this episode over others for me is the brutal scene and chemistry between the questioner, Perrin, and Egwene. Moving on to number 3 is Episode 4, The Dragon Reborn. This episode pulls in many things from later books, while having some parts that deviate from the books entirely, making Logain a much bigger character much earlier on for the show. I don't know much about Logain from the source material other than that he's a supposed false dragon and he has built up quite the following, which we see here in this episode as he has been captured by the Aes Sedai, led by the Red Ajah's Liandrin, who is basically Moiraine's rival within the White Tower, and his followers come to his rescue to help him escape. Big fight scenes ensue, as well as some of the show's best and worst visual effects in my opinion, as it dives deeper into the magic of the One Power and how it affects men and women differently. This episode shows off the power of Logain and the Aes Sedai, but especially sets up Nynaeve as one of the strongest channelers in the world. Meanwhile, we have Perrin and Egwene traveling with the Tuatha'an, aka the Traveling People, and there Perrin learns about the Way of the Leaf, which provides the most development for his character in regards to what he's been going through this season. And as for Rand, Mat, and their new friend Tom the Gleeman, they find a barn in which to stay in after talking down the family it belongs to from killing them. Mat is shown to be doing very poorly from the effects of the dagger, and soon a Fade shows up and kills the family, which Tom fights against to allow Rand and Mat to escape. However, the main question that remains is whether it was actually Mat who killed the family rather than the Fade, and this question seems to rattle in the head of the pure part that remains within Mat. This is a very solid episode, and I've seen some people call it their favorite, but personally I wasn't really a fan of the writer's decision to take out that lightning scene, and you readers out there, you know exactly what scene I'm talking about, so I had to settle with number 3 for this episode. Taking my runner-up spot is episode 6, one of the strongest in the show and the only one told from a single point of view, that of Moiraine Sedai. The Flame of Tar Valon further explores the history and the political structure of the White Tower and its Aes Sedai, further fleshing out Moiraine's character and her backstory, as well as those of the Amyrlin Seat, Siuan Sanche. We learn that Moiraine's departure from the White Tower in search of the Dragon Reborn was a secret plot between her and Siuan to be the first to locate him and guide him on the path of saving the world. We see glimpses of Moiraine's power within the politicking of the White Tower, as well as her connection to the true source as she heals Mat from the dagger's curse and puts Nynaeve in her place. Egwene and Perrin finally arrive to Tar Valon as well after their torturous journey, and once Moiraine is banished from the White Tower so that she can secretly finish the job of pinning the Dragon Reborn against the Dark One, she meets our characters at a portal to the Ways to take them towards the Eye of the World. It's evident that this is where Barney Harris left production, as the show had to find a way to remove Mat from the equation, because that final scene definitely felt like it came out of nowhere and threw a wrench in the season's and show's plans. It's a rather slow but very intimate episode that works on many levels, but it comes in just shy of my number 1. Which leads me to my favorite episode, episode 7, The Dark Along the Ways. I was highly anticipating seeing the Ways in the show, and it did not disappoint. Even though there were plenty of changes from the source material, I found this episode to be extremely engaging and a whole lot of fun as mysteries begin to unravel. The performances here are incredible, and while I know some people aren't crazy about the love triangle between Perrin, Egwene, and Rand, it makes sense in terms of the show once you remove yourself from what the books did, and allows for a dramatic and romantic story thread moving forward. This episode also introduces us to a number of new characters, but also familiar faces from the books, those being Lord Algamar, his sister Lady Amalisa, and Min. This episode does a great job at incorporating all these characters and giving us personal moments with everyone to further develop them in preparation for the big finale. The two standouts being, of course, Nynaeve and Lan's relationship, and Rand finally coming to terms that he is indeed the Dragon Reborn. And to put a cherry on top, we also get a glimpse into the past, watching Rand's biological mother fight off a group of enemy soldiers while she is pregnant and about to give birth. We find out that one of these soldiers is none other than Tam al'Thor, Rand's father, who helps the Aiel woman give birth and take her child to safety. It is such an incredible episode, paying off story threads from the season and setting things up to come, extremely well. And although the finale didn't wrap things up as well as it could have, this episode gives me faith that season 2 will deliver. But that's just my list. Let me know what yours looks like down in the comments below. Which episodes worked for you and which ones didn't? And are there any changes that you think improved upon the source material, or any that you just absolutely detest? If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit that like button and share this video with a friend, as that is what helps the channel out the most here. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I will see you all next time.